On a quiet Easter weekend, a powerful millionaire CEO, Jacob Foster, walked through a blooming park trying to escape the emptiness of his own success. He had money, status, and everything people dream of, yet he felt nothing but silence inside. Then a faint sob broke through the stillness. Beneath an old rusted swing set, he found a little girl clutching a tattered bunny, her eyes filled with fear and bruises on her wrists. In that fragile moment, two broken souls collided. What happened next was not a story of wealth or power, but of courage, love, and second chances. This is not just about saving a child, it is about how saving her would also save him. If you believe that love can heal even the deepest scars, then stay with us and subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories. Because this story will change how you see hope. Jacob Foster had everything the world could offer. His name commanded respect in every boardroom. His wealth placed him at the top of the city's most enviable circles, and his penthouse glittered with glass and steel high above the restless streets. Yet behind the polished surfaces and endless accolades, he lived in silence that no applause could fill. The mornings were the hardest. His coffee always grew cold before he touched it. His phone buzzed with messages that meant nothing, and the view outside his window only reminded him of how far he stood from everyone else. Easter weekend brought no warmth, no laughter, only hollow greetings from people who cared more about his title than his heart. He stared at the reflections of his own tired eyes and wondered when his life had turned into a series of transactions. The city blossomed beneath him, but he felt like an outsider, a man trapped in his own success. With a restless sigh, Jacob left his building on foot, ignoring the chauffeur waiting at the curb. He needed air, or maybe something deeper, an escape from the quiet ache pressing on his ribs. The park was alive with families, dogs chasing kites, children racing across fresh grass. Yet none of it reached him. His mind ticked with the same relentless rhythm of numbers, deals, and lonely evenings. Then, through the hum of spring, a sound cut through everything. A small sob so faint he nearly dismissed it, yet it pierced him more deeply than any loss he had ever known. He froze, heart pounding, scanning the playground until his eyes landed on the rusted swing set at the edge. There, crouched in the dirt, was a little girl. She could not have been more than 8 years old. Her hair was tangled, her jeans torn, her sneakers covered with grime. In her arms, she clutched a battered gray bunny with one ear dangling by loose stitches. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a fear far too old for her small frame. Jacob approached cautiously, aware that his presence might frighten her further. She flinched as he crouched down, retreating as if she expected harm. His voice was softer than he remembered it could be. He asked if she was hurt. She shook her head, eyes darting past him as though terrified someone might be following. When she whispered, "Please do not let them find me," his chest tightened until breathing felt impossible. He saw the bruises on her wrists, the raw patches hidden beneath her sleeves, and in that instant every deal, every polished success he had ever chased dissolved into meaninglessness. He promised she was safe, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. He sat on the cold mulch, careful not to move too quickly, aware that trust could shatter with the smallest wrong gesture. The silence between them was heavy, yet Jacob did not leave. He asked her name. After a pause, she whispered, "Nora." When he gave his own name, something fragile flickered in her eyes. He remembered his own childhood, the shouting, the slammed doors, the nights of fear he had buried beneath years of control. The sight of this child, trembling and alone, broke through the walls he had built around himself. The world around them blurred. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the broken swings with gold. In that moment, Jacob realized that his life, so meticulously ordered, had tilted in a new direction. It was not the kind of decision he could analyze with charts or reason through with strategy. It was raw, instinctive, human. He would not walk away. When she finally accepted the sandwich he brought, he watched as she tore it in half, placing a piece carefully before her stuffed bunny. The tenderness of the act made his throat tighten. She whispered that the bunny also got lonely. For the first time in years, Jacob felt something stir in him, something warmer than duty, more powerful than success. His lawyer warned him to stay out of it, to call the authorities and step aside. But when he looked at Nora, at the bruises and the hopeless resignation in her eyes, he knew he could not turn away. To do so would not only abandon her, it would condemn the last fragile piece of himself still capable of feeling. As the afternoon stretched on, he sat with her beneath the swing set, letting the world pass them by. The city that had once seemed distant and cold now faded entirely, leaving only the trembling child beside him and the quiet vow forming in his heart. He would protect her, no matter the cost. When dusk settled over the park and the air grew colder, Jacob extended his hand. Hesitant at first, Nora studied him, searching for betrayal. Then, with small steps, she stood and placed her fragile trust in him. Together they walked into the fading light, a man who had everything yet nothing, and a child who had lost nearly all but still clung to a thread of hope. Neither of them could know that this chance meeting was not the end of their solitude, but the beginning of a bond that would change both their lives forever. The walk back to the swing set was slow, as if every step Jacob took pulled him deeper into a decision he had not yet spoken aloud. In his hand, the paper bag with a sandwich and a small cup of juice trembled slightly. His lawyer's warning echoed in his mind, sharp and logical. Walk away, call the police, do not get involved. But logic had no place here. When he saw Nora still hunched beneath the swings, clutching her rabbit like a shield against the world, he knew that the choice had already been made. He crouched again at a safe distance and offered her the food. She studied it as if expecting a trap, her small hands shaking when she reached for the sandwich. Instead of devouring it, she carefully tore it in half and placed a piece in front of her battered bunny. The gesture was so innocent, yet so heavy with meaning, that Jacob felt his throat close. A child who had learned to share comfort with something that could never answer her back. "You are not hungry?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Bunny gets lonely too." Her voice was so fragile that he almost missed it. Jacob lowered himself fully to the ground. Ignoring the dirt staining his suit, he placed his phone on the bench beside her, screen glowing with missed calls and messages that seemed to belong to another lifetime. "You can call anyone you want," he said, his tone steady but gentle. She did not even look at the phone. Her reply fell between them like a stone. No one would come. It was not just fear. It was certainty, the kind born from too many disappointments. Jacob's chest ached with recognition, an echo of nights from his own childhood when he too had known that no one was coming. For a moment, time folded in on itself. He was not a CEO, not a man of influence, just another soul who had once felt abandoned. The sound of a police cruiser jolted both of them. Tires crunching, blue stripes flashing in the sun, the vehicle rolled past the playground. Nora pressed closer to Jacob, trembling, her fingers clutching the bunny until the seams strained. Jacob kept his voice calm, a whisper meant only for her. "It is all right. I will not let them take you." When the cruiser continued down the road without stopping, her relief was so intense it left her shaking. She asked him then, her voice no louder than a breath, "Why are you helping me?" Jacob did not hesitate. "Because I know what it is like to feel alone." The truth hung between them, a fragile bridge built from pain and recognition. Hours slipped by. The shadows lengthened, the laughter of other children faded, and still Jacob remained. He understood that the next decision would change everything. He could return to his penthouse, to the safety of indifference, or he could step into the unknown, carrying with him the weight of another life. When the cold wind made her shiver, Jacob finally rose and held out his hand. For a long moment she did not move. Then slowly she stood, her eyes locked on his as if searching for betrayal. She placed her small hand into his, and the fragile trust between them solidified. Jacob did not take her home to his gleaming tower of glass. Instead, he chose a small boutique hotel, a place anonymous enough to avoid questions. He checked in under an alias, barely acknowledging the curious glance of the clerk. The suite was simple, warm, and most importantly, safe. He guided Nora inside, her bunny still clutched tightly to her chest. In the soft light of the room, the truth of her bruises became clearer. Dirt and dried blood marked her wrists. Jacob swallowed hard, forcing calm as he retrieved the hotel's first aid kit. When the alcohol stung her skin, she flinched, but it was not pain that made her gasp. It was the strangeness of a gentle hand, of someone treating her wounds instead of causing them. "You are really brave," he murmured, voice thick. She chose a pair of pajamas patterned with tiny moons, disappearing into the bathroom to change. Jacob tried to fill the silence with clumsy gestures, making hot chocolate, burning his hand on the cup, cursing softly before catching himself. When she peeked out and offered the smallest of smiles, he felt something inside him loosen. For the first time in years, his failure made someone laugh instead of scorn. That night she insisted he remain in the armchair as she settled into the bed. Her question pierced him more than any financial negotiation ever had. "Are you going to send me back?" His answer was simple, certain. "No, you are safe tonight." Only then did her body relax enough for sleep. Jacob sat awake long after, watching her small form curled beneath the blankets, the stuffed bunny pressed against her chest. Outside, the city lights glittered, indifferent and endless. Inside, a fragile stillness wrapped around them. He realized then that his world had shifted irrevocably. The man who had once built his life on control and distance was now tied by choice to the trembling trust of a child. The knock at the door the next morning nearly shattered that calm. A woman with a clipboard and a badge introduced herself as Janet Price from Child Protective Services. Nora's fear returned instantly. She clung to Jacob's sleeve, her whisper desperate. "Do not let them take me." Jacob met Janet's eyes with steady resolve. "I will not leave her alone." As Janet inspected the room and asked her questions, Nora pressed closer against Jacob. The world of protocols and procedures demanded explanations, but all Jacob could offer was honesty. He told her how he had found Nora, how he had chosen not to walk away. Janet's expression was professional, but her eyes betrayed something softer. She promised a trauma specialist would come. For now, Nora could stay. When Dr. Simon arrived with crayons and coloring books, Jacob watched as Nora's walls began to crack. Between rainbow drawings and clumsy houses, she revealed glimpses of the truth. A man who yelled, who grabbed too hard, who left marks that no one wanted to see. The system had failed her before. This time, Jacob vowed it would not. He busied himself with small acts of care, buying pajamas, brushing tangles from her hair, fumbling through bedtime stories. Every gesture felt inadequate, yet each one stitched a fragile bond between them. His phone vibrated endlessly with board members and assistants demanding his return, but he silenced it. The only call that mattered was the one he had already answered beneath the rusted swing set when he chose not to walk away. When Janet returned later with paperwork granting Jacob temporary guardianship, the relief that washed over him was almost overwhelming. Nora sagged against his side, her hand reaching for his without hesitation. When asked whom she trusted, she answered simply, "Just him." In that moment, Jacob understood that wealth, power, and success were illusions compared to the quiet certainty of being chosen by a child who had lost everything. The world outside could wait. Inside this fragile bubble, he was no longer just a CEO. He was the protector she had found and perhaps the father she had always needed. The days that followed were unlike anything Jacob had ever known. His apartment, once a sanctuary of order and silence, slowly transformed into a space alive with the small chaos of childhood. Crayons rolled across glass tables, scraps of paper with uneven rainbows clung to the refrigerator, and mismatched socks appeared in corners where no one should have left them. For years, Jacob had lived in a world where everything was polished and predictable. Now he woke to the sound of a little girl humming off-key in the bathroom, her voice carrying through the hall like sunlight breaking through clouds. Nora began to bloom, not in grand leaps but in small, delicate moments. At first, she followed him everywhere, her wide eyes never letting him out of sight, her bunny always clutched tight. She was still fragile, her laughter tentative, her trust unsteady. Yet as days turned into weeks, she started to make the apartment her own. She taped her drawings to the windows, asked if she could stir oatmeal in the mornings, and curled up in a blanket to read while Jacob worked at his desk. One day, he found a drawing she had left on the table, the old swing set, two small figures beneath it. She had written her name in careful letters at the bottom. Jacob stared at it for a long time, feeling a weight lift and settle in equal measure. But shadows from her old life were not so easily banished. Threatening voicemails began appearing on Jacob's office line. A rough voice, sharp with rage, demanding the return of what he called his property. Nora's mother's boyfriend, Calvin, lingered in a battered car near the building, his presence like a storm cloud waiting to break. Nora froze each time she glimpsed him, her body rigid with terror, her breath shallow as if she could vanish if she stayed still enough. Jacob tightened the security of the building, checked locks twice each night, and fought the urge to confront the man directly. His sister Sarah counseled patience, reminding him that the legal process must be followed. Yet every night Jacob lay awake, listening to the silence, waiting for danger to come crashing through the door. Despite the fear, moments of light pushed through. Nora's laughter, still rare, began to grow stronger. Once, as Jacob attempted to cook spaghetti and ended with a pot stuck to the stove and sauce splattered across his shirt, Nora giggled so freely that it startled him. The sound filled the apartment like music, chasing away the gloom. Jacob laughed too, clumsy and unpracticed, realizing how long it had been since joy had felt natural. Reprieve was brief. A call came from Child Protective Services announcing an urgent visit. An anonymous report had accused Jacob of unlawfully keeping the child. When the social workers arrived, their notebooks open, their expressions cool, Jacob felt a dread heavier than any courtroom battle he had ever faced in business. They questioned Nora gently, but she stiffened, her answers short, her eyes darting constantly toward Jacob. Her small voice broke as she whispered, "I want to stay here. He listens. He makes me cocoa." The workers exchanged glances, scribbled notes, and promised to follow up. After they left, Jacob sat on the floor beside Nora, both of them drained. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head, tears running silently down her cheeks, and pressed her drawing of the swing set into his hand. "You found me. That is not wrong." Time carried them to the courthouse, a place where decisions heavier than love and trust were made. Jacob stood on the cold stone steps with the drawing folded in his pocket, Nora waiting in another room with Dr. Simone. Inside, Calvin sat smirking, his suit ill-fitting, his arrogance poisonous. Nora's mother sat beside him, hollow-eyed, her hands twisting with nervous shame. Jacob's attorney spoke of bruises, threats, and recordings that echoed Calvin's cruelty. The courtroom listened, its air tense, until the evidence became undeniable. Nora's mother, under the weight of proof, broke in tears, confessing her failure to protect her child. Calvin's arrogance cracked under cross-examination. His voice rose, anger spilling through his practiced lies until even the judge saw the danger beneath the surface. When Nora entered, holding her bunny and the drawing, the room fell silent. Her voice shook, but her words carried a strength that silenced even Calvin. She spoke of nights hiding under the bed, of shouts that rattled walls, of bruises that never faded. She held up the drawing for the judge. "This is where I hid. I did not want anyone to find me." The courtroom stilled, every face marked by the weight of her truth. Calvin's rage flared again, his words sharp, until the judge's gavel cut through the chaos. She declared that Calvin would have no further contact, that custody was stripped, and that Jacob would be granted guardianship. As the bailiff placed handcuffs on Calvin, dragging him from the room in a storm of curses, Jacob turned and met Nora's eyes. She ran into his arms, trembling but smiling through her tears. Outside, the rain eased into a soft mist. Nora tugged at Jacob's sleeve and whispered, "He cannot find me under the swing anymore, right?" Jacob crouched, meeting her gaze. "No one will ever hurt you again." For the first time since their meeting, the fear lifted from her face. She slipped her hand into his, her trust no longer tentative but steady. Life did not return to what it had been before. It became something new, fragile, and real. Nora moved into his apartment not as a guest but as family. Her drawings covered the walls, her laughter filled the rooms, and every morning began with pancakes that Jacob burned more often than not. They visited the farmer's market together, choosing apples as if it were a sacred ritual. Slowly, the apartment ceased to be a cold fortress and became a home. One afternoon, Jacob signed the adoption papers, his hand trembling not with doubt but with awe. Nora added her name carefully beside his, then looked up with shining eyes. "Does this mean I am really yours?" Jacob nodded, smiling through the tightness in his throat. "Yes, it means we are a family now." Spring returned to the city, and with it came new beginnings. At the park, the old swing set stood freshly painted, gleaming beneath the sun. Nora laughed as she pushed Jacob on the swing, her bunny bouncing at her side. For a moment, Jacob was not a CEO, not a man of control, but simply a father, a brother, a man who had chosen love over fear. That night, as Nora tucked herself into bed beneath her star-patterned blanket, she whispered, "I am glad you found me. I am glad you stayed." Jacob kissed her hair, his heart full in a way it had never been. "Me too, Nora, me too." The city outside glittered with restless energy, but within their home, peace reigned. It was not just her rescue. It was his, too. There are moments in life when everything shifts quietly, without warning, yet forever. For Jacob Foster, that moment came not in a boardroom or on the day of a lucrative deal, but beneath a rusted swing set, where a frightened little girl clutched a broken toy bunny and whispered for someone not to find her. What began as an unexpected encounter became a journey of courage, of trust, and of healing for both of them. Jacob had lived for years surrounded by wealth, power, and applause that echoed hollow in the night. But all it took was one child's trembling hand to reveal how empty his world truly was. Choosing to stay with Nora meant risking everything: his reputation, his career, the fragile walls of control he had built around himself. Yet in losing that illusion of safety, he found something far greater. He found love that demanded sacrifice, compassion that reshaped his heart, and a family born not of blood but of choice. Nora's transformation was no less powerful. A child once silenced by fear and bruised by neglect, she found in Jacob a protector who did not turn away, who listened when no one else would, who chose her again and again, even when it meant standing against the storm. With each small moment, sharing a sandwich, painting a sunflower, laughing at burnt pancakes, she began to believe that safety was real, that hope could return, and that home was not just a place, but a person who stayed. Their story reminds us that healing is never one-sided. Jacob did not only rescue Nora. In trusting him, in allowing him to love her, she rescued him too. She gave him back the humanity he had buried beneath success, teaching him that true wealth is measured not in dollars or contracts, but in the steady rhythm of a child's breathing as she sleeps safely for the first time in years. It is easy to believe that the world is too broken, that kindness is too fragile, that second chances are rare. But Jacob and Nora's story shows us otherwise. It tells us that even in the darkest corners of loneliness and fear, light can break through in the form of a simple promise: "You are safe tonight." And that is why we share these stories. Because love still matters, because courage still exists, because second chances are real. If this story touched your heart, even in the smallest way, we invite you to stay with us at Hidden Echo Stories. Subscribe today and join us, because the next story might be the one you need to hear, the one that reminds you that hope is never truly lost, and that healing often begins with the quiet choice to care.